So Stockfish is now the official, or well, unofficial, computer chess champion and basically the strongest chess playing entity in the known universe. Well, at least until Lila takes over. And yeah, it destroyed Komodo in the super final. And today we're going to take a look at a game it played in Division P, which is the 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 stage before the super final. It was a really nice game, the Grand Prix. So without further ado, let's take a look at it now. So e4, c5, knight c3, going for a closed Sicilian. Now against the closed Sicilian you can go for e6, which kind of makes f4, it kind of decreases the strength of f4. So now if f4 you have an easier game, because the standard plans, f4 is basically the Grand Prix, but against e6, this type of setup against the Sicilian, the Grand Prix, isn't as strong, because not only the structure is harder to break with f4, I mean with e6 against f4, but also the standard maneuvers that the Grand Prix player is used to, especially the queen e1, queen h4 maneuver, which gets the queen over to the king side where it attacks. This doesn't really work in e6, so the Grand Prix player has to adapt, and they're not quite used to do this because the system works against basically any setup in the Sicilian. But e6 is a nice way to meet the Grand Prix. So after knight c3 going for a closed Sicilian e6, probably white should just go for the closed fianchetto variation. Or, well, this may later transpose into the Grand Prix with a fianchetto, which is a bit different than the normal Grand Prix. Anyway, this is, I guess, too much opening discussion. So f4, and I'm going to show you a game Aronian played against Ivanchuk in f4. So here Aronian just got completely outplayed. a6 is designed to prevent these kinds of maneuvers, so white should just go for this now. Knight f3, knight c6, d3. Okay, white makes it clear that he'll either develop like this or probably like this, which is much better. So yeah, he develops like this, g3, bishop g2, and bishop e7, castles, and he goes for knight e5, which puts a really strong knight in the center, and wants to go g4, g5. So you remove the knight from here so that the queen is able to protect g4 from the knight, and you can move g4, g5. So g4, takes, and now b5. The engine doesn't like going for g5 immediately, thinks it's too weakening. You should probably go knight b1, c3, kick away this knight, then go for g5 later on, after you go like this, and maybe knight d2. But g5 immediately was played, and here Aronian just completely outplays, Ivanchuk completely outplays Aronian. Here he starts attacking aggressively on the queen side, and now after knight c5 and knight g3, trying to protect this pawn. Now Aronian really needed to play a3 to open up some space on the queen side, but instead he plays the egregious b3, which completely shuts down the queen side, and black is quite happy now, because not only does he have plans of opening up the king side, and only he can do that, because now a3 is much more weakening to this structure. So if you played a3 before, at least these pawns are here, but now if we play a3, now these pawns are like this, so it's very weak. The c pawn becomes very weak also, and the b pawn especially. So, and the diagonal, this diagonal is opened up, and so Ivanchuk, seeing all this, seeing he has the bishop pair, so he likes open positions, so he wants to go for open positions, and seeing that there is a weakness on this diagonal, and seeing that d3 weakens b3 severely, because again a3 isn't possible, so he goes for d3. And after takes, he exploits this diagonal, as we said. So it's, if you just know these position, like why b3 is a bad move, because it opens up the diagonal, it weakens this structure, especially on c2, so b3, a2 becomes weak. So if you know all of this, you can find black's moves, which are d3 and queen d4. Now here white is forced to jettison a pawn, and he tries to go for a Hail Mary kingside attack, here sacrificing a piece, tending to go for knight f5, but Ivanchuk just shuts it down, and here there's not much to talk about. Aroni got completely outplayed, and he just lost. And now we'll take a look at a game Anand versus Kasparov. So again, this kind of setup. Now, I'm showing you these games, well, for a simple reason. To show you how not to play against e6. You shouldn't play routinely. To show you the correct maneuvers you need to play against e6. So if you're a Grand Prix player. And to show the black players also that e6 is quite a strong move against the close Sicilian. So you force white to kind of to kind of adapt. So anyway, this kind of setup is played by Kasparov. Again, the fianchetto, and Anand elects to close the king side. I don't really have much comments here because then we'd have to deeply analyze this game. So let's just take it on surface level. Out of the opening, I guess Kasparov was a little bit better, but Anand slowly outplays him. And here Kasparov goes for h4, aiming to open up the rook on h8. And if what happened in the game, which is g4, trying to shut down this bishop, Kasparov wanted to sacrifice a pawn. This is accepted, and now the rook is opened up. But Anand correctly argues that this isn't enough for equality, and this was proven further as Anand continued to outplay Kasparov. But here he made a bit of an error. He went queen f4, retreating. He should have retreating. So he should have went for knight h3 and a later knight f4, and he would have had an almost winning advantage. Well, it's basically winning. But instead, now it was Kasparov's turn to slowly outplay Anand. Well, here he wasn't like technically outplayed. It's not like he was outplayed here. But Kasparov slowly consolidated the position, and here Anand miscalculated. Knight e4 would have protected the a-pawn and shut down the bishop's diagonal, but instead Anand sacrifices the a-pawn because he thinks his h-pawn would run. But this was a miscalculation on Anand's part. Again, here he should have played knight e4, but he still went for this idea, which Kasparov very, very intelligently refuted. So now he goes here. With the king, he blocks the pawn, and the rook is free to move and pick up the other white pawns, combined with this very strong bishop. So this is what happened, and he lost. Okay, so now we really need to take a look at the game, but this shows what how you can play against f4 if you play e6, and how white can find improvements, of course, against e6. It's not like after e6 f4 you're lost or anything as white, but you need to be more accurate, and especially not play in standard Grand Prix fashion, because that will just get wrecked. So in this game, again, the opening book here is in full force, so it's not like Stockfish itself is picking these moves. But anyway, d6 is what happened. This the opening book chose d6, or well, it was chosen by Kato, who chooses the opening books for these engines in the super final. Well, in Division P. Actually, I'm not sure about the regulations of Division P. I'll look them up after this video, and if you want, you can post them. Okay, so here f4 is played, and this is given a slight advantage by Stockfish at depth 40 with the move that's chosen by Komodo, which is knight c6. Again, though, this is book, so it's not chosen by Komodo. Okay, and this, I would say it's more close to equal than not. It's closer to equal than not, but yeah, it's maybe like it's easier for black to outplay white. But this is this isn't what happened in this game because Stockfish is a much stronger engine. So knight c6, knight f3, and g6 is played. But knight f6 is in Stockfish's PV after knight c6, so it gives knight c6 minus 0.16, depth 40, and it gives the following line: knight f6, bishop e2. Bishop e2 is already a bit strange. Probably should have gone to c4, but it wants to go for this maneuver in mind. It's also fine, acceptable, but this isn't the way the Grand Prix should be played, in my opinion. And again, the knight e5 idea, which we saw in the earlier point, in the Aronian game, I mean. And yeah, and the bishop goes to f3, and this is an equal position. But g6 is tried, bishop c4, bishop g7, all standard, d3, of course, developing, standard moves, e6, trying to go for d5 later on. This is of course impossible now because it's overprotected. It's protected more times than it's attacked. So e6, castles, and knight g7. Now this is starting to become a threat. So white cleverly plays queen e1, which prevents d5 tactically, because after d5 takes, now the knight is pinned. So to make d5 possible, black needs to castle. So if black castles, now d5 is a threat, because there's no longer the spin. But instead, black chooses to go for a6, aiming to go for b5. And the very, very nice move by Stockfish is a3, which gets, and this is an important idea in the Grand Prix anyway, which lets the bishop have the a2 square, where it will be safe from b5, knight a5 kind of expansions, which would try to win the bishop pair. So let's say you play like king h1 here, which is a bit of a ridiculous move. Now the immediate knight a5 or b5, and now knight a5 is quite strong because you remove this very strong bishop. This bishop is very, very important in the Grand Prix, especially against this fianchetto structure, because these pawns are all on light squares, and this bishop can greatly attack f7 and the other light square weaknesses. So castles is chosen. Stockfish here, even though it played a3, it also still likes b5, because it gains queenside space. And you can see from the principal variation here, c4 and d5, so it liquidates the center and even sacrifices a pawn here with d4. And this position is equal because black has tremendous activity for the sacrifice pawn. And look at the pressure on the b pawn, for example, by these pieces. So this principal variation actually shows something very important. Now the reason Komodo lost this game is because it basically did nothing on the queen side. It just maneuvered its pieces randomly on the queen side. It didn't pay attention to white's threats or white's plan. It didn't stop it in any way, and it didn't do anything in the center. So already here we can see b5 is a great move because it's doing something on the queen side, something useful, unlike what Komodo did, which was not useful at all. So b5 and rook b8, and now c4. This is a very key idea. c4, we will see this again in Stockfish's PV as a way to maintain equality for black. c4 is very important. And also we see in one of Stockfish's PVs this kind of maneuver. Rook a7, rook e7, to further protect the queen side, the king side, protecting h7 and f7 as well. So if like white goes for this kind of idea, and you move the bishop and you move the pawn, at least this rook laterally defends. So this kind of lateral defense was also missing from Komodo's play, and c4 was missing, and b5 was missing. So and d5 also was missing. So going with c4 and d5, this is the key idea. So just Komodo played very weakly, in my opinion. So castles bishop a2. Knight e2 was also possible. It's given the same evaluation, 0.00. It's completely equal. And again, we can see here from Stockfish's principal variation. Look at how aggressively it plays the black pieces. So it goes for d4, d5 again, opting for queenside counterplay. And look at bishop a6 attacking d3. So bishop a2 and d5, d5 anyway, which is a good move by Komodo. And one thing I want to mention here is that usually in computer games I'm able to find like this one critical moment or a couple of critical moments where the engine completely played like crap. But here actually what's funny is that I couldn't find this because Komodo kept making mistakes at every turn. So Stockfish completely outplayed Komodo in this game, and it's actually reminiscent of the way Stockfish outplayed Komodo in this game. It's reminiscent of the way AlphaZero outplayed Stockfish, which is quite funny. So anyway, 92 is tried, and now a5. Again, c4. Look at Stockfish's PV. So you weaken this entire kingside structure, central structure. Now after e5, queen b6, you have to go queen f2. And if the queens are traded, that means that white doesn't enjoy any advantage at all. Maybe a very slight pull. Because here king h1 doesn't work because of c takes. And bishop d7. And now this file is open, and black gets the queenside counterplay necessary to have some sort of edge. Well, yeah, he probably has a bit of edge here. Okay, so unfortunately Komodo goes for a5, which is a step in the wrong direction. Now the idea of a5 is to go b6 and later bishop a6 and putting pressure on d3, so white can't play c3, d4, e5 so easily. Because white will want to play e5, why? To close down the central structure. After you close down the central structure, when the center is closed, you have a free hand to play a wing attack. So when you close down the center, you play a wing attack on the king side. So you close down the center, and after this, now c3 is harder to achieve because d3 would be hanging. But if white could get c3, d4, e5, and he'll get e5 of course, but c3, d4 is harder to get. But Stockfish, Komodo, even though it prevents this plan somewhat of c3, d4, it allows Stockfish to later on play this plan, which is what I mean, what's so bad about Komodo's play in this game. So anyway, so c4 is a much better move because it kicks down the central structure. And again, e5, queen b6, and now you have to block with the queen. So a5 is tried, e5, b6, again heading for bishop e3, and now bishop e3. Now this move protects this diagonal, of course, develops a piece, connects the rooks, and prepares c3, d4, of course. And maybe even wants to reroute like this, I don't know. But it's just a normal developing move. So now bishop a6. Queen d7 is again the principal variation of Stockfish. It gives minus 0.13. While you can notice here that bishop a6 isn't even the top 4 moves Stockfish is considering. There's a reason why. Here, after bishop a6 in the game, g4 was played, which was a very strong move. So the center is locked. Well, not completely locked because this pawn could still be pushed. But it's somewhat locked, so white's king is safe. There's no... If the center were open, it's much easier to attack an unsafe king. But now, since it's closed, you pursue a wing attack and you go for g4. And notice how Stockfish doesn't immediately go for queen h4, which would probably be met by knight f5. It doesn't immediately go for that, so it prevents knight f5 with g4. So notice the finesse in Stockfish's play. I think most Grand Prix players would have played queen h4 because they just want to continue with the plan. But again, there are no clear-cut systems in chess. There are, but you need to adapt also. It's all about being adaptable. Evolution. So yeah, g4 was played, and this gains much more in strength after bishop a6. Why? Well, you can see why, because the bishop was here, kind of on this diagonal, so g4 would be much weaker. But now the bishop gets removed from this diagonal. Look at Stockfish's move in the principal variation in contrast, queen d7. Now instead of the bishop being here and no pieces on this diagonal, which is what happened in the game, so there are no pieces on this diagonal, now black controls this diagonal with 2 pieces. So look at the finesse in Stockfish's replies also to its moves. So now it gives this PV, and yeah, white is completely fine here. Black is completely fine here. There is no clear advantage for white. So black is completely fine. And queen d7, if white does go for g4, now f6 or even f5. And f6 here just opens up the position, and you're defending e6 well enough because of these two. While in the game, if you go for h5, of course you just take, and there's nothing spectacular here. But f6, if you go for this now, look at what's happening here. You remove the bishop, you go for bishop c3, and now the pressure on this point is very strong, especially because you want to go here. So the rook probably has to move. Now you play this, and you have very good pressure here. Compared to the Stockfish's PV with queen d7, now if you go for g4 and after f6, you don't have much pressure here because it's defended twice. So that's a very key difference. So this is one point that Komodo misplays. So g4, queen d7. Now it goes for queen d7, but this is a bit too late. A bit too late. And now actually with the queen on d7 and the bishop not being on c8, there are more tactical possibilities in white's favor, which we'll see later on. So as you can imagine, if there were a knight here and this pawn moved, and this bishop were here, like this pawn moved, then this kind of alignment would mean that bishop takes e6 would fork these two pieces. So that's one consideration. Of course, bishop c8 doesn't directly prevent that because it would still be a fork, but the kind of defense that's present here means that it would be like there's more defense here, so you wouldn't need to worry about these things, even though this direct threat isn't prevented. You can just prevent this knight g5 idea anyway with h6. It's a far off consideration, but it kind of happened in the game. Okay, so queen g3 and f6. Queen g3, okay, it's still, Stockfish still gives that depth 41 equality, but it's starting to teeter now. f6, there's also the f5 PV, which goes like this. Notice, of course, that after f5, g5 would be crazy, because you would just close down the king side. Actually, it wouldn't be too crazy, because you later have h4, h5, but still somewhat crazy. You just support it with h3. Knight d8, queen h4, knight d6, queen g3, and sort of going for a draw. Now rook f2, a brilliant move by Stockfish, going for rook g2 and possibly rook h2 later on if the h pawn were to be moved. A rook lift, one of my favorite moves in chess. So f5 and now h3, again not g5, which might be possible though. And this is still given as equality by Stockfish, but if you play on a bit, it starts liking white very, very slightly, and eventually it will turn out to be a win, which is what happened in the game. Again, why? Because this kind of idea was really stupid by Komodo. Let's just be clear here. It was, I'm not impressed at all. So Komodo ends up playing rook a8, which is the kind of nonsensical move that you'd expect an engine in a closed position to play. But not Komodo, because it's friggin' 3,300. 3,400 even. So the fact that Komodo is playing like this is quite telling. It's quite telling indeed, because it's just being completely massacred by Stockfish. And rook a8 is maybe slightly better for reasons that will again have to do with this structure, with this pawn. this over defends this pawn. And now after queen h4, knight d8, also over protecting this pawn. Now this position is probably closer to equal than not. Stockfish finds a funny way to draw here. Bishop d2, yeah. And now you can see the draw. Bishop b5, knight. Like this. This is a draw. So Stockfish finds a funny way to draw. But again, overprotecting e6, that's what's necessary in this position. Because otherwise, white will just crash through. And also another thing. h6 is a possibility that Stockfish Komodo really needs to consider. But it doesn't play h6. It didn't play c4. It didn't play queen d7 when the bishop was on c8 to overprotect e6. It didn't play knight d8 and rook a e8 to protect e6. And it didn't play rook a7 or followed up by rook e7 or just staying on a7 to laterally protect this point. So Komodo just ignored all of these 5 moves. What were they? I hope you can repeat them. Again, knight d8, rook a e8 protecting e6, keeping the bishop on c8 to protect e6 after queen d7, this maneuver, and c4 also, and h6. These are the 5 moves that Komodo doesn't play and which basically give equality. So if we are not going to play these moves, of course Stockfish is going to win. We can see here this kind of, again, now we see an important point. After you've defended e6 so much, why are we defending e6? It's not just about defense. We're defending e6 to be able to play d4. Because after d4 we can get the bishop to the long diagonal. And we're just completely fine. There's no way for white to break through. And we can later play h6 to prevent knight g5. Or to kick it away. And we're completely fine. So here we play d4. After the bishop moves, we have the bishop on this square, and we're completely fine. Well, if not completely fine, at least we're much better than what happened in the game. We're doing much better than what happened in the game. So this is why we're protecting e6, to be able to move about like this. So again, what is white's plan? White's plan is to get the queen to h4, knight to g3, knight to g5, maneuver the bishop. Maybe it will stay on this diagonal, or maybe it will maneuver to this diagonal. And this bishop will probably maneuver to this diagonal. So this is white's plan. So you take a look at the white pieces at this position. This is very important now, because it's all about plans. So the position is closed, somewhat closed I guess, and it's all about plans. So you take a look at white's pieces, you start imagining in your head how you can improve them. And you do the same thing for the black pieces. So black, though, needs to react to white's threats because white is slightly better. So black needs to react to this plan. And how does he react? Well, first of all, after knight g5, you go h6. This is one idea. And after this pressure on the e6 pawn, you start maneuvering your pieces like rook a e8 and knight d8 to defend e6. So you need to realize what white is threatening to be able to counteract that. And this is what Komodo failed to do. And well, it's a friggin' engine. So it's brute force. Machinery didn't make it think of that. Of course, the immediate d4 is met with knight g5. Threatening mate and threatening this point, so you lose. So that's why it's important to overprotect e6 first, then go d4. Okay? And this is another line. It's just wasting moves to see how white will break through, and he'll break through as such. I forgot to mention that you need to play c3, d4 first, of course, to completely lock down the center. Of course, this is a very important point. You can't just maneuver your pieces like that, because you need to be careful. If black is able to protect e6 and go d4, he's achieved equality. or close to it. But if you yourself are able to go c3, d4, then it's basically lost. And again, this is what happened in the game. So rook ac8, which was a nonsensical move because it does nothing. Queen h4 and bishop b7. Again egregious. Again egregious. Here there was a4 going for knight a5. There was rook c to d8, which at least puts well, it doesn't really make d4 possible, but I mean it's more useful than being on c8, right? So you get the rook here, and then the other rook here, and also knight d8 over protecting e6, and rook c7 protecting the king side. So all of these moves were possible, but instead Komodo goes for the egregious bishop b7, which is terrible. Bishop b7, you're no longer putting pressure here, so Stockfish immediately pounces on that, and now it goes d4, and it just wins. So again, terrible play by Komodo. So the bishop was here attacking d3, and now it just moves it back for no clear reason. I mean, I get it wants to go on this diagonal, but after c3, d4, this diagonal gets closed. And again, d4 now isn't possible because of knight g5. Or even bishop takes e6 and knight g5. This is maybe even stronger. Anyway, so c3. And h6 wasn't the principal variation here. So instead of bishop b7, h6 was possible. So queen h4 and h6 was possible. And this is somewhat better because at least the knight doesn't go to g5 immediately. But also h6 isn't that great, to be honest. Just stick to a4 or the move I like the most, knight d8, which is also, although it's given plus 0.31, it's the fourth best move. I think it's maybe like the second or first best move, or the best move after. But again, rook c8. What kind of move is that? Rook ac8, still going in the wrong direction. Komodo should have found improvements here. Move 10, move 11, move 12, move 13, move 14. Now it's starting to get a bit too late, but still salvageable. But still, with bishop b7, now it's basically lost. I think bishop b7 was the last mistake. And now c3, a4. Okay, trying to go for knight a5 stuff, but again bishop a6, you go rook d1, and you eventually push through with d5, knight g5, and you get a position somewhat similar to what happened in the game. So c3, a4, and rook d1. Okay, this was a bit unnecessary by Stockfish, but I mean, okay, it's trying to prepare. So rook d1 was a bit unnecessary by Stockfish. Probably just d4 immediately, but okay, it's trying to wait a bit, prepare it, maybe lift the rook up to d2. Rook d1, knight a5. Okay, so the point of a4, but again, too little too late. Bishop a6 was also possible. Again, we see this PV. And here you actually don't push through with d4 with the intention of capturing with the d-pawn, because now the c file is open. So now if you take back with the d-pawn, you justify Komodo's silly rook ac8 move. And it ends up being some brilliant move because it controlled the c file after 10 moves. But it's not a brilliant move, it's a stupid move. So you take back with a piece, and now the c file is closed, and now you don't justify Komodo's silly rook maneuver. Now in this position you maneuver your pieces, and you're doing quite alright. But knight a5 stride, and rook g2, again the point of rook f2, getting to the g file, lining up with the king. Bishop a6, putting some pressure, now the point of rook d1 is better revealed. But still knight g3, and now you'll go later knight f5, and very strong attack, king h8, and now finally d4. just closing down everything. And again, should there be a capture, you just take back with a piece, not with a pawn. And okay, king h2 was given as another possibility here, and the pieces again get maneuvered in such a way. Okay, so just as we talked about, the bishop, now that the king is off this diagonal, so the bishop maneuvers to this diagonal to attack h7, the knight goes to g5, the rooks are maneuvered to the g file, and the knight here, it has many possible squares. Stockfish in this PV decides it's better on this square, maybe going here, maybe later going here, or maybe even overprotecting p4. So this is maybe the piece that has the most potential, but the other pieces will usually always look like this. They will be maneuvered like this, or the bishop may stay on this file depending this diagonal depending on where the king goes. So anyway, d4, rook c7, and now finally knight g5, and this is crushing. Bishop c4 was given as a possibility, but it doesn't change much. Again, the pieces are maneuvered as such, and here actually it goes for the exchange, which I'm not really sure I agree with, but okay, this should be winning for white. Anyway, rook c7, too little too late, trying to defend h7, knight g5, h6. Again, h6 at some earlier point needed to be played to prevent knight g5, but now after h6, the knight doesn't even have to retreat here, but it does do so. Knight f3. And now notice how Stockfish acknowledges the power of latent bishops, of far away bishops. So knight c4, you're attacking this bishop, you go back to c1. And later Stockfish will play this. So let's see here, knight a4. Now it plays this, which isn't in the principal variation here, actually. King h1, there's king h2, stuff like that. But in the game it does end up going for this, maybe at lower depths. So here the bishop e3 is the principal variation, which again goes for this. But somehow Stockfish doesn't consider what happens after knight a5, which is what was played in the game. After knight a5 it goes back to bishop e3, that's threefold repetition. So it will change its mind somewhat. It thinks though knight a5 isn't the best, it goes for queen d8. So it disagrees with Komodo's principal variation. But again it goes for bishop b1 here. So basically bishop b1 is a way to avoid shenanigans. Like it could have gone to bishop e3, but after Komodo would have played this, and it went to c1, and Komodo played this, which isn't Stockfish's PV, but it's what Komodo wanted to play. Now Stockfish wouldn't have gone for a draw with bishop e3, of course. It would have gone with bishop b1. Okay? So anyway, bishop b1 was played, and queen e8. So bishop b1, again, you see that this diagonal is useless, so you go toward this diagonal, which is quite strong, especially now that something will happen on f5. So bishop b1, queen e8, king h2, preparing rook g1, and rook g8, rook g1. I'm going over these moves quickly because Komodo's basically lost ever since bishop b7, which was here, 18 bishop b7. Earlier it was doing small errors which may have been salvageable, but after bishop 18 bishop b7 it's completely lost. So we reach this point of the game, rook g1, queen f8, and now finally Stockfish recaptures and goes for knight g5, aiming for knight e6 stuff. This is prevented, but e6 anyway, aiming for knight f7, and there's no good way to stop it, so bishop f6. And now the brilliant sacrifice with knight takes f5. Note that knight f7 will just... Well, actually taking here wouldn't be that good, because you can do this. And here, if the lag will let me. So actually here probably just taking with with the king is better. So here you have 4 minor pieces against 3, but there's a rook and there's a rook, and there's a rook, and this is the extra piece. So you're up in exchange here. But actually after knight f7 you can just move. But then this would happen. Okay, so knight f7 was possible, I guess. Actually no, you don't go to, you go here. And then the bishop is captured. Okay, so knight f7 was possible, but Stockfish goes for an even stronger move, because that would just be an exchange. So Stockfish goes for an even stronger move, knight takes g5, and it can't be recaptured with the g-pawn. Now, of course, if it's captured with the knight, you just take, and this is winning. It can't be captured with the g-pawn because again of knight f7, and now if king h7 you just take the bishop, and if queen takes f7 you take here actually, and this cleans up to a mate. So the only other recapture you can't take with the h-pawn because it's pinned, so you take this piece with the bishop, which is what happened in the game. Now after takes there are deadly threats on the king, so h5 to remove these deadly threats. Like if knight f5, let's say, you just take, and this is checkmate. So h5 is played, and now this move protects everything, and should there be too many recaptures here, h5 is weak, so rook takes e6 is tried. Again this pawn is quite strong also, but now this move reveals knight f7 check. So let's say if the queen were to move to g7, knight f7 check, king here takes, and notice the power of this bishop. Again the latent bishop, you see the point of bishop b1 now, queen a6 and queen takes h6 check, and the game actually continued with queen takes f2 and Komodo resigned. So it played queen takes f2 check and resigned. So a very interesting game. We'll summarize everything in the second part of this video, but I just want to say how Komodo got completely outplayed. Okay, so as a summary for this video, well, Komodo didn't react quite well to Stockfish's kingside attack. It just moves pieces around on the queen side, and it didn't play out a proper plan. And the proper plan was to, of course, overprotect e6, then push through with d4 and get the light squared bishop on b7. So you overprotect e6, so there's no knight g5, bishop e6 kind of ideas. And Komodo also missed key liberating moves, like c4, destroying the central pawn mass, which is very important in the Grand Prix, you should always remember that. h6, protecting against knight g5, which may or may not be a weakness, but usually it's not a weakness, but you need to use your positional judgment to know. And overprotecting e6 and defending with d4, which we talked about, and rook a7 laterally defending against kingside threats. We'll see why in the application novel settings why this is a very important idea. And earlier queen d7 and keeping the bishop on c8 to overprotect e6. This makes g4 less powerful, so it would have basically prevented g4, which was one of the moves that won Stockfish the game. And Stockfish went for a brilliant piece rearrangement. It put the bishops back like snipers on c1 and b1, where they cannot be attacked by black's knights, and put the knight on g3 and the knight on f3, and the knight on f3 went to g5, and the queen on h4, which helped attack, and the rooks were lined up on the g file, which also opened up and basically killed black. So yeah, that's it for the summary, and now let's head over to the key concepts. Okay, so the key concepts for this video. Well, first of all, you need to react to your opponent's plan. You can't just sit around and do nothing, and you should ask yourself, how does my opponent want to rearrange his or her pieces? That makes knowing his or her plan easier. So if you knew where Stockfish's pieces were going, you would have overprotected e6 and went for d4 and bishop b7. Close the center to make wing attacks possible. This is what Stockfish did to make the king side attack possible, and this is what Komodo should have done to make the queen side attack possible. And c4 is a very important idea in the Grand Prix, always remember it. It breaks down the white center and helps a lot in getting equality, achieving equality, equalizing. And when being attacked on the king side, you can't just sit around with no plan. Defend, attack on the queen side, and or open up the center with d4. Do something. You can't just sit around and wait for white to destroy you. Don't do that. So application and novel settings. We're going to take a look at this game, which by transposition reached the same position. Here queen e1 first was tried. The queen e1 is actually the move order in the game. But now a6, a3, okay, so still following the game. And now h6. Okay, so actually there was no transposition. This just followed the game to the T. And now h6 is again an interesting move because it blocks knight g5, but at the same time it allows these kinds of sacrifices. So black needs to be careful, but at least here he's actually doing something, not like the game we saw where Komodo just sat back and enjoyed the sun. b5, it's a move I like. The low depth Stockfish prefers b6, but b5 is an excellent idea, aiming to go for queenside counterplay, which again Komodo didn't go for. Queen g3, okay, maybe bishop e3 is stronger to better control d4, but okay, queen g3 is also possible. And now castles. Perhaps here the engine wants to go rook a7. Again, a very interesting idea. Defending like this, another idea to remember. This is one thing Komodo missed as well, rook a7. But castles happened, f5, the classic pawn sacrifice, and now this. And now, yeah, maybe h5 kind of blocks things up. But for some reason, black went for b4. b4, and this allowed takes. Here, knight d5 would have been very strong. And the main line is bishop e6. Because if takes, you just take back, and you're threatening this knight. So let's say he takes, and bishop d7. Now you have knight g6 utilizing the pin. So knight takes g6, rook f8, knight h4, and maybe knight d4 sacrificing the rook there, or the exchange, or this. And actually here this is maybe stronger. Knight d5, the main line after bishop e6 is takes. And here also you're doing quite alright. Up an exchange. But white decided to go for bishop h6. So here probably h5, and there's no attack by white. So h5 and you go knight d5, and this position should be around equal after the bishop e6 we saw. At b4 and takes, and now knight g5. This doesn't work, not because of what was played in the game, but because of c takes b2. As you can see, the game is filled with mistakes, and this is great. This means that black is doing something if the game is full of mistakes. If black just sat back like what Komodo did, the human would completely destroy black. But here something happened. So here c takes b2, and let's say rook a b1 is played, then d5, and again the king escapes, and black is doing alright. And if bishop takes g7, you also escape. This is one ridiculous line, and the king is safe here on e5, which is quite surprising, but it is. So the move here was c takes b2, so you force the rook to go to b1, and then you play d5. But d5 immediately was played, and after takes, here, yeah, just rook here to prevent c takes b2. Now this happened, and now this move is a little bit too late because there's knight f6 now, in contrast to the position before. Here there's no knight f6, now there's knight f6, and this doesn't work, simply put. And white doesn't have enough for the sacrifice material. So you see what Naiditch did here? He didn't like play that accurately even, but white didn't either. And that's because there was some tension, there was some, you know, kind of back and forth. This is for human play, but I mean engines, it's the same thing for engines. Like if Komodo would have tried h6 here, or it would have played b5 or rook a7, again, we're making use of these concepts. Like here, if Naiditch watched my video, he would have found rook a7 instead of castles. Hmm? Am I right? So yeah, it's these concepts that we can apply in different settings. And it's the same concepts in the Grand Prix. So yeah, this is how we'll apply these concepts. Okay, so for our fun fact, DRGN1 or Dragon 1 is a peptide synthesized to resemble a Komodo dragon peptide. It's created by Komodo dragons, which promotes wound healing. This peptide promotes wound healing against S. aureus, so it might prove beneficial in the fight against antibiotic resistance. So thanks a lot, Komodo dragons. You're very helpful animals. Okay, for the future considerations section, first of all, why is 9a3 not played as often? In other positions in the, not specifically this position, in other positions in the Grand Prix, it should be played more often as well, in my opinion. And what was the cause of Komodo's lack of plan? Maybe this needs to be checked by the Komodo team. Obviously, we who don't have access to the source code won't know. And finally, a biological question: how will we fight antibiotic resistance? Will DRNG1 prove to be the peptide that kills off all antibiotic resistance? Will it be a useful step in the right direction? Okay, and that's it for the video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you got something out of it.